Better, stronger, disease-free humans. Editing human DNA could save lives, possibly enhance them. But should we be playing God? This is Roundtable with me, David Foster. Genes determine our health, our looks, the way we work. They are the ingredients for life. And the idea that we could one day change them is, in one sense, an exciting prospect, but also an ethical minefield. As science moves closer toward gene editing, the concern is that it could go too far and possibly create a new elite group of enhanced humans.
DNA. The building block of all living things. It exists inside every cell and allows us to evolve, thrive, and survive. Our genes shape who we are as individuals and as a species. As mankind marches on, so do new techniques in science that are changing the way we think about our very existence.
Evolution is an even less exact science than genetics. Evolution is the random combination of genes from two sources. It is unpredictable and it produces mutations.
Altering the building blocks of life has long been the stuff of science fiction. Changing our nature at the most fundamental level to make us stronger, healthier, even better looking. It's the beginning of a controversial journey that could lead to a rise in what many are calling designer babies. Could they form new future generations of enhanced human beings? And should we be playing God? Genes have a profound effect on our health. DNA sequencing has allowed researchers to isolate thousands of them that increase our risk of disease. Scientists say manipulating them could make us healthier and save thousands of lives around the world.
If we can intervene in that process to make sexual reproduction less of a lottery, particularly for people for whom it can be predicted that they will pass on genetic diseases, then that must be an improvement.
Ever since the world's first test tube baby, there's been rapid progress in the field of human reproduction. So-called three-parent babies, where selected DNA of a third person is used in the fertilization process, is now pioneering treatment for mothers who have rare genetic diseases that they risk passing down to their children. But there's been a new discovery in genetic engineering that could change how we live and what we perceive as normal forever. It involves isolating a defective gene, removing it from DNA and replacing it with another, cutting and pasting the building blocks of life. But the process could, in the future, be carried out in an unfertilized egg, triggering new genetic mutations that potentially make babies stronger, better looking, even more intelligent. It's no surprise then that these techniques are reigniting ethical debate on how far this research should go.
The eyes to the right, 382, the nose to the left, 128.
Last year, the UK Parliament approved further research into gene editing in human embryos. There are voices in and out of the medical community concerned it will lead humanity down the path towards what they call non-therapeutic genetic enhancement. That essentially means designer human beings. There's no consensus yet on how far we should be pushing the boundaries of research. But as soon as the first gene-edited baby is born, that door can never be closed again.
So is human gene editing ethical? What restrictions, if any, should be placed on it? And is there anything actually wrong with wanting to improve the human race, even on a superficial level? Joining me at today's roundtable from California, we have Zoltan Istvan, a transhumanist who wants to use gene editing to eradicate death. John Harris, who we saw in that story just now, has been an ethical consultant to the European Parliament, the World Health Organization, and the European Commission. To my left, Dr. David King, director of the Human Genetics Alert, a group opposed to the use of gene editing for human enhancement. Also with us, Lynn Murray from Don't Screen Us Out, which is against non-invasive prenatal testing for Down's syndrome in pregnancy. Zoltan Istvan, let me come to you first in California. Transhumanism, as I understand it, and I'll probably be sort of slightly coarse in describing it this way, wants to see humans move from the state we're in at the moment to a state of what you believe to be enhanced perfection. What is your idea of a perfect human being?
Well, a perfect human being, I think, would probably one day leave even biology behind, but it's certainly something that doesn't die, isn't contingent upon environmental factors, is something that can strive to become a much more, I'd say, kind of superior living entity that just isn't always kind of hunted, I guess, by the specter of death, but just something a lot stronger and more powerful.
Lynn, let me come to you. Rachel, your daughter, 17,
Yes.
Has Down syndrome. What Zoltan says, does that describe to you a perfect person?
I think everyone has their own idea of perfection, and I can't understand how we can get to an agreed consensus of what is perfection. People talk about an ageing population. People talk about people with Down syndrome living longer, and they see that almost as a threat. So, that's used as, oh, he might outlive you, she might outlive you, and yet here we are talking about people not dying, So I think we should embrace diversity and say, if someone is born with a genetic condition, then let's see how that goes, and let's see how the environment does affect them, and can we support that to be a good
Zoltan,
life?
I'll come back to you on that in a little while, but John Harris, to my right, where are we at now? What can we do that we couldn't do 10 years ago?
Well, we have many more choices now. I just would like to say that I'm certainly not interested in perfection. I'm interested in people being able to choose as far as possible how they wish to live and the sorts of children that they wish to have. But I think perfection is, the idea of perfection is a nonsense.
What can we do now?
Well, not as much as most of us would like to do. But what we look as though we're going to be able to do, as was said in the package, is we'll be able to use gene editing, among other techniques, to eliminate or prevent diseases, and indeed to make human beings possibly longer lived, certainly live a greater proportion of their reasonable life expectancy than most do at the moment.
So let's be clear about this. Gene editing is done at what stage? It's not something that could happen to you or me now, is it?
Well, it could eventually, but it wouldn't be.
Wouldn't be much use in my case.
Well, it might be. I won't mention your case. It might be, but at the moment, it's being contemplated in the embryo. Yes.
And what do you say about that, David?
Well,
I mean, you're about ethics in gene editing, which is a part of genetic engineering. What are the issues morally?
I like to think of this not so much in terms of morals, which is or ethically, which is a kind of rather sort of abstract philosophical framing. I like to talk about the real world. And Zoltan talked about making superior human beings. Now, what we saw the last time people tried to do that in the first half of the 20th century, particularly, obviously, most notoriously in Nazi Germany, was that the concept of what was a superior human being was not a matter of individual choice. It was a matter of existing oppressive social prejudices about which kinds of human being are better than other kinds of human beings.
Do you want to put that to Zoltan?
And
because
that is the risk that we will get into. It will maybe happen through the free market rather than the state forcing us to do certain things. But the result will be pretty similar in terms of the way that things shift.
So Zoltan Istvan, you want to create a master race?
Well, I mean, I don't like to even consider history when we're kind of thinking about these things.
But
everyone
you
wants
have to
paint.
take it into account.
Yes, I understand that, but I mean, we're under a kind of a brand new age. We're talking about science to make the human being perfect, eliminating suffering, eliminating disease. These are not questions that should we do it or should we not do it? Well, of course we should do it. We don't want to see people die. We don't want to see people suffer. We have a moral mandate to make ourselves stronger, more viable entities so that our children can be happy, our parents can be happy, our loved ones can be happy. I mean, this is kind of like basic self-improvement.
Look, nobody thinks it's wrong to treat disease, to set broken limbs and so forth. And most people, and I'm with Zoltan on this, don't think it's wrong to also prevent disease coming into existence in the first place. And as for improving human beings, I've been a lifelong educator. I'm a university professor. I've spent my life trying to help young people usually, but older people also, achieve their potential, learn things that they want to learn, acquire skills that they think will be useful. And that is a form of enhancement. But we're all in favor of it. Indeed, it is criminal not to be in favor of it. You have to educate your children.
Yeah.
Lynn, and sorry, I want to come back to you because Zoltan was talking about nobody wants to bring people into this world with defects, I think was the word he perhaps used.
Yeah. Well, again, that's all subjective, isn't it? We all have defects, and how do we know what the perfect human being is? It's so difficult to know. We are a diverse group, and I mean, John's saying we choose the children you have. Well, you only get to choose that once, and then the next generation have been chosen. So how does that affect them when they have been chosen?
Yeah, I mean,
well, I can tell you because I was chosen.
Yes, I mean,
we'll get on to that in just a moment because that sounds very interesting.
I completely agree with what Lynn said. I mean, I think that I would agree with Professor Harris at least that there are some ways in which we improve human beings through education, for example, that nobody has a problem with. And I even accept that Zoltan is well-intentioned in wanting to reduce suffering. But, reality tells us, we have it, bang in our face, it's happened as a result of history, that if you try and do that in certain ways, if you try and enhance people in certain ways, like, designing them from scratch, from before they were born, what you get is the operation of social forces deciding, oppressive social forces, deciding which kind of human being should be born.
But what about this? Today's medical newspaper headline saying that checking a thing called CRISPR, which is a means of sort of checking for genetic defects, suggests that Huntington's disease, admittedly only tested in mice at the moment, may be a good candidate for a cure. That's not happening now, but it could happen. When could something like that happen, Professor?
I'm not in the stargazing business, but hopefully
we're not
it could
talking
happen.
decades.
I hope not. No, I hope sooner than that.
And what about cancer?
I have no idea. I'm not an oncologist.
Likewise, I mean, all I can tell you is that every time that one of the, I'm sure you'll be very familiar with the phenomenon that every time scientists announce they've made a dramatic breakthrough in X and will cure cancer in 10 years or something, and it never happens. Basically, it always goes slower than the hype.
Zoltan, presumably you're in touch with people who you hope will be able to eradicate death to make the perfect person. Where are we from your point of view with regard to that? And secondly, what would your world actually look like?
Well, it's hard really to say how far away we are, but I think a lot of experts would say we're within 15 to 25 years of some type of indefinite lifespan, whether it's through bionic organs or genetic engineering or even the kind of science fiction-y concept of mind uploading. But no matter what it is, indefinite lifespans are coming, and we're definitely going to make it before the end of this century. And I think a perfect world is, where everybody lives as long as they want to live, and they don't have to suffer from things like cancer or things like, Alzheimer's. They can just simply be able to bypass disease using different types of technologies like genetic editing.
But it's
that's
also
a great world.
It poses problems which are practical problems too. If everybody lives for as long as they want to live, there's not going to be much space, is there?
Well, overpopulation is certainly one of the main concerns of everybody living forever, but I would rather take that problem than right now the problem of 150,000 people dying every day on planet Earth. I mean, that's a tragedy.
We'll get on to your political ambitions in just a moment and how you might like to take this into some kind of reality, having sort of had a pop at the presidency and now wanting to be in charge of California. We'll come back to you on that, Zoltan, if we may. But the idea of indefinite life, personally for me, it sounds hideous.
I think it's part of, I mean, and this is where the playing God issue comes in, that this idea of perfecting everything through science is a very old myth. It's a mythology that's existed in our society for the last 400 years, and it's what people, religious people refer to, and I'm not religious or pro-life, by the way, but it's what religious people talk about when they think about, when they use that phrase, playing God. It's this desire, basically, for total control over nature. And look where it's got us at the start of the 21st century in terms of the total environmental crisis that we're in. Of course, that's partly due to the forces of capitalism, basically, constant expansion of the economy and the destruction of nature that way. But I also think that this attitude of science of we're going to totally control the world and we're going to force nature to do what we want is the problem. And when you start applying that to human beings and you say, we're going to totally control how human beings be, and this genetic lottery is a terrible thing.
I want to put a point to Lynn here.
There's a problem.
Because there is something, there's been research done that suggests that people who have some kind of disability actually feel it enhances their lives in some ways. Is that your experience?
Well, yes, and I think what I would like to say, I agree with good intentions, and the problem is around screening, which is where our Don't Screen Us Out campaign has lobbied people. What we see is, yes, there are medical advancements. NIPT may well be a great medical advancement, and we're going to be able to map the whole genome and read, a baby's whole genome. But the way that it's being administered is not ethical. We have people playing God in consulting rooms. They don't, women are told this is all about you, and then people are taking control and have an opinion on disability that is quite a depressing one. So they don't, there's not even a level playing field here. So what happens when you start to talk about perfection, in your own sort of perspective is that you try to press that on other people.
Yeah, we'll come back to you, Professor, in just a moment, if I may. But Zoltan, in California, the suggestion is you're playing God, you're aiming for high political office, you would control other people's lives. You don't have that right, do you?
Well, I mean, I don't think we'd be controlling people's lives. I mean, everybody would have a choice to do this, but it would sort of be like, using a cell phone or using technology. Of course you would choose to do this. Of course you would choose to upgrade yourself and your lives so that you can have a better life. I mean, this is very natural. Human beings have become this wonderful, species essentially because we know how to use tools. We've made a lot out of science and technology, and I believe we're going to continue to do that. And everyone has a choice on how much they want to do that.
Professor Harris, I mean, one of the things I've read that Zoltan has said is that within 15 to 20 years, and he alluded to a short time span, women won't actually be reproducing using their own uterus at the moment. It'll be done in a different manner. Where do you take it?
Well,
not that specifically, but the...
Look, everybody raises the question, where should we draw the line? And I'm a great line drawer, and I've got a pencil in front of me, and I'm drawing some lines. But
what's above it and what's below?
I will draw lines where I see a good reason to draw them. I don't believe in drawing lines simply because line drawing is a great thing to do.
Yeah, but where are those lines?
Well, that's what we're discussing today. We're discussing where the line should be drawn. Now, David invoked the spectre of totalitarianism and the Nazis. And indeed, the title, I think, of Lynn's organisation is Don't Screen Us Out, which is fine, as long as you leave me the choice and other people the choice to make our own reproductive decisions about the sorts of children that we want to have.
It's a matter of social policy. It's not a matter.
No, it's not a matter of social policy. It is a matter of freedom. Oscar Wilde.
We already have a strong social policy.
I didn't interrupt you, David.
In this country, so.
Oscar Wilde is very fond of his definition, and I am too, of selfishness. Selfishness is not living as one wishes to live. It is asking other people to live as one wishes to live. I don't want to impose reproductive choices or my vision of the world on anybody else, but I ask very respectfully that you guys don't impose it on us. And that means, and the best way of combating totalitarianism is to maximize individual choice, to make sure that the citizen has the maximum freedom that is compatible with a like
Professor,
freedom
you talk
for all.
about individual choice, but here you are advising supranational bodies, European Parliament, among other things, about ethics. So you're imposing your will on a
Not at all,
larger number of people, or your sentiment.
Yeah,
If you ask my advice, please, David, if you ask my advice, then I give it to you. You're free to take it or not. And that is the point of advice. The same with education. Children can accept or reject what they're taught in schools or what their parents teach them. That's the great thing about having autonomous individuals, which is what we all are.
I mean, that's for another time, isn't it? But when children are impressionable, it's very difficult to say that they can make their own minds up when somebody's telling them that something is right in their opinion.
I think John could easily follow our campaign. What we're saying there's a problem with, and I'm not sure about women that choose to terminate, how well supported they are, but there is no protocol for women who test, have a positive finding, and then choose to continue with the pregnancy. There's no protocol for that. So what we're saying is
there's no prohibition of it.
There's no support. There's no support for choice.
But we have to come round at this particular point to where we might be in 5, 10, 15 years, and the ethics of it. So are we lagging behind in bringing, in your opinion, David, bringing ethics to the fore of this debate? Because I've heard a lot about what people believe.
It's quite interesting, this situation with this particular issue, because this is about the only issue where a scientific technique, which is not yet, technically feasible, has been already banned by most of the industrialized countries in the world for the last 25, 30 years. You have to ask yourselves, I mean, the only other examples of that are to do with weapons of mass destruction, basically. So why did they do that? They did that because there's a really, really good reason, and we've experienced what happens if you don't. And I just want to say something about John's argument about freedom, which I think is a total red herring. And Zoltan has answered the point very nicely. What he said was, if you allow everybody the freedom, then of course everybody will choose. But actually, that's a totally false model of society, because the fact is society has ideologies going on it. One of those is dislike of disabled people. One of those is sexism. In India, for example, we have a massive imbalance in the population caused by allowing those forces of sexism and patriarchy to determine who gets born.
We're getting near the end of the programme, so I'm going to throw this to California and say the suggestion from this table, Zoltan, is that the brakes need to be put on people like you and the sort of progress you want to see, because it's not viewed as
suggestions from
progress.
part of this table.
Well, I respect the suggestions, but the reality is that I think these things are going to move forward. First off, let's just, from an economic point of view, we're talking about multi-trillion-dollar businesses looking forward. I mean, improving the human being is sort of at the very core of what people want to do in their lives. So I think that's very important. But I also think, just from a moral or kind of a liberty point of view, people want to have the right and the choice to do exactly what they want to do to their bodies. And they should have that right and that choice. So, I find it very hard, especially coming from, quite liberal California, that this is something that's going to, be held back. Yes, it's being held back a little bit. America's quite religious, whatnot. But in the long run, genetic editing is going to win, and so is improvement of our bodies.
John Harris, let me ask you this. We need to improve physical perfection, but this is, from my point of view, I think we'd be better off improving human spirituality and the way we behave with one another. So you are, in effect, the mad scientist saying, let's get on with changing human beings, when we should be looking in other directions about happiness.
No, I'm saying let's get on with protecting human beings. And I said very clearly earlier in this discussion that I think perfection is a nonsense. There's no such thing as perfection. But we do understand what is harmful to human beings, what is painful, what shortens life, what causes misery. And insofar as technology allows us to reduce that burden, we would be wicked not to do so.
Lynn, Rachel has Downs. She's 17. She's at school. She's on a school trip today.
Yeah.
Would you change anything?
I couldn't change her now because that's just who she is. She has Down syndrome and that's part of what she is. I couldn't remove it now, you know. It was difficult at first, and for me what was difficult was that I kind of realised there wasn't a lot of research around Down syndrome, you know, therapeutic research. But she has benefited from medical advancements, you know, and she has benefited from some people supporting her, but we've also found discrimination.
Have you ever asked yourself the what if, though? If this had happened 40, 50 years, if you'd been born in another time, what if I could have?
Well, if it was 40, 50 years ago, she would be in an institution.
And 40, 50 years from now?
50 years from now,
could have had a choice.
I'm scared for what happens because I'm not sure it goes in the direction that society wants it to, or that our structures suggest that they might. I think we need to look more at what we are supposed to be as a society before we go ahead with technological advances.
Fascinating. Thank you very much indeed. We didn't get into the commercialism, we didn't get into a great many other things, but it certainly has been stimulating. I thank you, Zoltan, 2 in the morning where you are in California. Appreciate you getting up to join us on Roundtable, and the 3 of you with me here. Thank you very much indeed. So is gene editing an answer to the world's health problems, or could it give rise to a new kind of elitism reserved only for the few who can afford it? And how far is too far when it comes to changing the DNA of the future? This has been Roundtable with me, David Foster. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye for now.